Okay, thank you everybody for joining us today. As we move along with these parshios, like we spoke about last week, that deal with the construction of the Mishkan, and this week actually is Parsha Tetzaveh, and Parsha Tetzaveh starts on page 464 in the Hebrew, page 465 in the English, and the article Chumash actually primarily speaks about the Big Day Kahuna. It primarily speaks about the clothing of the Kohen and the Kohen Gadol, right? We know that the Kohen had four specific garments: the hat, the pants, the shirt, right, and the apron. And then the Kohen Gadol had another four special garments that were added to that, where the tzitz was a special sort of bandana that he had, going into gold with God's name on it. The Tumim, the long robe with the pomegranates and bells on it. Right, so he had extra clothing, but primarily the majority of this parsha speaks about the clothing for the Kohen Gadol, and not only that, the beginning starts off about sort of inaugurating the Kohanim, making the Kohanim, the children of Aaron, the Kohanim, as it starts off in verse 1 in chapter 28 on page 464. It says, "Va'ata hakrev elecha es Aaron achicha," and now you yourself, right, shall bring up. Hakrev is to bring, right? A carbon is called hakrev, akrava, right? Is to bring close. Right? So you should bring Aaron, your brother, from the rest of the Jewish people to be the Kohen, right? So that's how it starts off with, and then it speaks about different things that they did to make them and the different clothing, and primarily the majority of the parsha speaks about the Kohen becoming a Kohen and the clothing of the Kohen, which we're going to get back to in a minute. But interesting. This parsha starts off. That's not what it starts off with. It starts off with the mitzvah of the menorah. Va'ata tetzaveh b'nei Yisrael, command the Jewish people. V'yichu lach Hashem and zayza. So you should take the pure oil, right? That is for the menorah, which has to be lit forever, right? And you should light it in the Moed, right? And Aaron Uvanav will light it from day to night, right? And from night to day, right? And this will be in front of God forever for all generations, right? So the first three verses, it's speaking about something that the Kohanim will have to do, but it speaks about the menorah, not the building of the menorah, but it speaks about the service of the menorah, the oil that needs to be done by the service of the menorah. So the commentaries want to know, why does this parsha start off with the menorah, right? If it's primarily talking about the big day kahuna and Aaron and the Kohen, right? Why did it start off with the menorah of that you need to have pure oil, right? Could have spoken about that, when it spoke about building the menorah, or at a later time when it tells us about the service of the menorah. Why now, in the beginning of this week's parsha, before telling us about Aaron becoming a Kohen and the servant and the different clothing? That's one question. Along the same lines, the commentaries want to know, if you go all the way to the end of the parsha, right? So you go all the way to the end of the parsha, to page 482. Page 480, sorry. No, it's 482, because 480 still speaks about the different sacrifices that they brought, right, to make Aaron the Kohen, and the things that they did. But 482, chapter 30, verse 1, it starts off with Vasisa Mizbech, and he should make the Mizbech, the inner Mizbech, the small Mizbech, right? Miktar Ketor is the Mizbech that has the Ketores, and then it goes into the details of the building of the Mizbech, and then it goes into the details of the of the mitzvah of bringing the ketores, which is with the different incests, the different spices that were brought, the special, very important avoda that the Kohen Gadol would do, right? It's special spices that were put on there, and the smell, right, was called reach nichach, a positive smell, but it goes into the building of that mishkan and about that service. So same question, right? The commentaries want to know. It seems very interesting that the whole parsha is speaking about Aaron and the Kohanim and the building and the clothing, but it's sort of squished in. It's sort of in the beginning of the parsha speaks about the menorah, the oil for the menorah and the lighting of the menorah, and in the end of the parsha, right? It's like the Oreo, the cookie of the Oreo is the oil, right, and the menorah, and the other cookie of the Oreo is the mizbeach hapnimi, the inside mizbeach with the mitzvah of the ketores, right, which is the different spices, right, that are brought on there, and it's a special reach, a special kind of service, right, and then the cream, right, it's a pretty thick cream, right, because the majority of the parsha speaks about Aaron and becoming a Kohen and the different clothing of the Kohen. So why is it set up this way? What's the reason why it's sort of sandwiched in between these two mitzvahs? And as we know many times, we don't say in Judaism coincidence. It's happened to be that way. I don't know. That's someone who wrote it. I don't know. He's like, okay, where did I put this? I don't know. Let's put it here. Right? That's not how it works. Right? Everything, of course, has a reason why it's put where it is. So, excuse me. So I saw this beautiful idea I brought down, and I want to just expand on it for a few minutes. That these two things they're not the same reason. There's different reasons, and we'll first talk about the oil, and then we'll talk about the ketores, right, and the mizbeach. That before Aaron became a Kohen, right, the mitzvah of the menorah, right, as it says that the oil of the menorah has to be pure oil, can't have any sediments in it, right? And therefore, for the menorah, they use the first drop, and then the rest of it they use for other things that they needed oil for making the bread or other sacrifices needed oil. But for the menorah, it had to be pure oil, that the first squeeze of the oil, right, would make sure there's no sediments at all, right? That's what was used for. That's what was used for the menorah. And the reason why the menorah has to be pure, right, is because the menorah represents the light of the Jewish people, right? We know there's we all have it. I'm now looking at the small chapel. The Ner Tamid is on right now, right? The eternal light of the Jewish people, right? Well, we have now in our synagogues, in our shuls, right on top of in front of the Aron, we have a light. So in the olden days they had these huge big candles, right? And the shamus was in charge to always make sure that these candles were lit, right? And now we have, we're lucky, we have these, bulbs that last forever, right? But it's Bruce. Imagine if you had to go and change the candles. Would you have taken the job? I don't know. But that's what they used to have to do. But now we have the light. That light is representing this ner tamim. That's the word of the pasuk. The first verse, the second line, right, says, "Kasis lema'ar ner tamim," a light forever. Tamim means constant, and a constant kindling of the light, right? And that is from evening to morning for all the Jewish people. Now that light, that's what the menorah represents. The menorah represents the neshama of the Jew, the part of the neshama of the Jew that is untainted, that survives all exile, that survives all persecution, survives all we have different kind of we have physical persecution and a spiritual persecution, right? Right now, thank God we are not. We of course we have some anti-Semitism, right? But it's not. We're more dealing with spiritual persecution now, right? At our fingertips, we have everything out there and every distraction and everything telling us this and telling us that, and life is good. And why do we need to, learn more and give more tzedakah and be more religious, right? But each one of us, our neshama, has a part of it that is pure, that is completely pure, and it's untainted. And that's what keeps us our drive alive. To at any point of our lives, doesn't make a difference when, right? We are able to lashuv, we're able to return, we're able to lahakriv, we're able to come close, we're able to become closer to God, because we have that. As I'm sure you've heard this terminology, the pintaliyid, right? We have this internal flame that's pure, that is always yearning to get closer to Hashem. It might be covered with a lot of plaque, it might have a lot of force fields around it, right? But it's always still there, and it's untouched, because something that is pure can never be tainted. If it's pure, it can't be tainted. And as we know, oil doesn't mix with any other liquid, right? Oil doesn't mix with any other liquid, right? Water bumps on top, everything else bumps out, doesn't mix. So when you squeeze that oil out, and if it's completely pure, right, it doesn't mix with anything else. It's always around. And that's what the menorah represents. And that's one of the deeper ideas of why it has to be pure, right? Why the oil has to be a pure oil, and reflecting to us that we have that neshama, we light that candle to remind us that each one of us has a ner tamim, has a burning soul inside of us, that we just have to feed it a little fire. We just have to feed a little fuel, right? And as we feed it, we come to shul and we put on our yarmulke and we light Friday night candles. That's the fuel it needs, right? We take out our checkbook and we write our tzedakah, and we don't speak lashon hara, and we make a blessing on our food, and we go to Schnucks and we buy from the kosher section, even though it's a little more expensive, right? We order from Evergreens or whatever it is, right? We do things that are that's the fuel, and that's fueling that pintaliyid, that pure part of the neshama that is untainted, and then that starts glowing and bigger, and it starts encompassing our body, right? And that's how we could always return. That's how we do it. So that's the idea of the menorah, right? And I just want to expand on that a little bit, right? That still doesn't answer our question. We'll get to that in a minute. But I just want to expand on the idea of the menorah, and that's why it has to be pure, right? And that's what the Torah is telling us. Ner tamim, it's not only a metaphor; it is talking about the menorah itself, but it's referring to us also, that that's our neshama. Our neshama is a ner, is a candle. That's why when someone has a yahrzeit, right, what do? They light a yahrzeit candle, right? They light a candle representing our neshama. So that's the idea of the menorah, the idea of the purity, and the idea of, first of all, just a lesson that we should learn from, and more of a lesson, an encouragement, a motivation, a reflection of how we work. Right? That the more we kindle it, the more we add fuel to it, the greater it gets, because it's always there. It's like that pilot light that never goes out, right? And this, you don't have to worry about any wind or anything. It never goes out. It's always there. Okay, so that's the menorah. So now, based off this idea, the commentaries say, a few of them, Saporna and others, say that the Torah is telling us that before the Torah tells us that Moshe went and called Aaron to become the Kohen, that the kahuna, being a Kohen, has to be a pure kahuna. It has to be able to serve Hashem in the Beis Hamikdash. We all can serve Hashem, right? Of course, we all can serve Hashem, and it doesn't make a difference, if you're one parent is Jewish, or both parents are Jewish, if you're a convert, if you're whatever it is, doesn't make a difference. As long as you want to serve Hashem, right? You could kindle that neshama, and you could grow, and Torah is for everybody. Right? But to kahuna, to be a Kohen, to be in the Beis Hamikdash, and to be representing the Jewish people as a service of the avoda in the Kohen Gadol, you have to be pure, a pure Kohen. Right? You have to be a pure Kohen. Just like the oil has to be pure to menorah, right? The oil has to be pure and it can't have any and can be tainted at all. So too, the Kohen, they have to be pure, right? Because to be able to do that service and to be able to be to be the messengers for the Jewish people, number one, you have to be a pure lineage of Kohen, and number two, the Kohen himself has to make themselves pure, right? They have to cleanse themselves and to pure themselves to be able to be that Kohen, to serve the Jewish people and to serve Hashem. And therefore, say the commentaries that HaKadosh Baruch Hu put the parsha of the menorah, of this part of the menorah, not the whole menorah, but this idea of the menorah, of the clean, pure oil before the kahuna, is to teach us this important lesson that those that light the menorah, the Kohen that lights the menorah, has to be pure himself to be able to create this energy of what the menorah represents. So that's one idea, right? Number one, we expanded on the menorah itself and the purity of the oil and what that means to us. And that answers the question of why it's in front of us. So now, before we move on with the parsha, let's just answer the other question. As we ask, so why is the other cookie of the Oreo over here that we have in this week's parsha, right? The mizbeach hapnimi and the mitzvah of the ketores, right? Which is this incest, the incest, the beautiful smoke, the reyach, the smell of these what's spices, right? That are brought. Why is that the end of this week's parsha? And the answer the commentaries say is because when the Kohen does the avodah correctly, and the Kohen, it reflects internally, right? Then this as the Torah says, reach nichach l'Hashem, it brings a good smell to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, right? So then, excuse me. Then the Kohen will end up being that positive messenger, right? And all the Jewish people gain from that, right? We have a good Birchas Kahanim. The Kohen does the avodah correctly. All the Jewish people gain from that, just like the Ketores, right? Just like the Ketores has this power of saving from death, the Ketorah has the power of sort of whatever that means, but sort of transitioning Hashem from midas hadin, from a judgment to mercy, and the Ketores has this power. That's the mizbeach hapnimi, the inside mizbeach. So too the Kohen, when they do their avodah properly and they're pure, like we spoke about. So that's what they could accomplish, and that's why the Torah puts this at the end of that parsha. Okay, I want to talk about a few more things in this week's parsha. Number one is the Urim and Tumim. So I know last year we spoke about some of the other clothing of the Kohen Gadol, but the Urim and Tumim, chapter 28, verse 30. So that's on page 470. So first, page 30 speaks about V'nasata l'choshen hamishperes Urim Tumim. So there was a choshen, right? And if you have the Arch Chumash, they have pictures of the clothing on the side, right? So you have the choshen, right? The choshen was like the chest plate, and then the Urim Tumim was placed in there, right? And it was composed of the 12 stones that had different letters, right? And they were on the chest plate, right? The choshen, and then the Urim Tumim is sort of inside there, and that's what the Urim Tumim are. So the commentaries speak about what is the Urim v'Tumim. The light, the literal translation is Urim comes from the root of Or, right, which is light, and Tumim is Tamim, is pure, right? That's what it comes from. The root of Urim v'Tumim is light and pure. And the Mefarshim, the commentaries explain that the way the Urim and Tumim worked, right? We're not going to. There's the Art Scroll has, if you want to read, there's have different explanations, and the different letters came up, and the letters of the stones had the names of the Shvatim, and throughout those letters, there was all 24 letters of the Hebrew alphabet, right? Is there. And the Kohen would have a question. Someone would have a question for the Kohen. It was a Nasi or as a king, and they would ask, and this is beyond my scope of knowledge, right? How it worked exactly, right? But Kabbalistic and spiritual things, the different letters will light up, and the Kohen had to be able to interpret what those letters represented, right? And that's what the Torah says a lot of times. And you'll ask the Urim V'Tumim, you'll ask the Urim V'Tumim, and they'll show you the way. Right? So that was the Urim V'Tumim. Who wore the Urim V'Tumim? The Kohen Gadol. Only the Kohen Gadol wore the Urim V'Tumim. Why is it called Urim Tumim? Right? So the commentaries explain that it's telling us that Or is light, it's something that lights up, right? Tumim is something that's pure. The Urim Tumim was there to remind us that when you have clarity, you can have purity, right? When you are able to see something clear, then you can be tamim, then you can be pure, and you can be complete. We know the word tamim is pure, right, and complete, right? Tamim is something is complete, right? And you can be complete when you have light. What does that mean? And I was talking about a few things that are a little deeper today, and so bear with me, right? The commentaries explain that what it means is like this, is that since the way the letters come up is not, it doesn't say go to war, right? It doesn't say buy that stock, right? It doesn't say that, right? It different letters. The Kohen Gadol, when he sees the letters, he has a clarity, right? Has a clarity of how to interpret those letters. That clarity comes from the holiness of the Kohen Gadol. The Urim Tumim has to be placed on, as the verse says, right? V'nasa arnis hamishpat b'nei Yisrael alibo lifnei Hashem tamim. It will be on his heart in front of Hashem all the time. Right? It says clearly, and he will carry the mishpat, the judgment of the Jewish people, alibo, on his heart, right? Tamim. It has to be on his heart. Because the Kohen has to be reaching a level of where he has a spiritual knowledge, the clarity of Torah, but in sync with his heart, with his neshama, with his heart of balancing that out, that he's able to then be able to interpret everything properly, right? And only someone that has the clarity, and as we said, has to be pure, like the menorah, like the oil, right? That's what it has to be pure, like the menorah, right? He could go ahead and interpret it to be clear and clear, and it'll be tamim. It'll be a complete thing. What does that have to do with us? All right, what does that have to do with us? Okay, very nice. So that's a Kohen, very nice. I'm not a Kohen. Even if I was a Kohen, probably won't be the Kohen Gadol, right? Even if I would be, there's no base to make this now. Like, so, okay, what does that have to do with us? Okay, very nice. Okay, thank you. Very nice. Okay, I want to learn Torah, of course, good. And that in itself is an answer. I want to learn Torah. I want to understand how things work. It gets me closer to Hashem, without a doubt. But there's also something for us, as we always said, it's always something for us to take away from, something for us to learn from. And that is that the Farshim explain that it tells us how we have to be able to make those decisions in our day-to-day lives. Right? There's so many things that we think we sort of have these stones in our lives, right? Not exactly the stones, right? But we have these like things that happen and they pop up here and nothing's clear, right? Yeah, Drano is clear that it'll kill you, so you won't drink it, right? But nothing's really clear in our lives, right? Some things are a little more clear, some things are a little less clear, right? I'm good looking, it's very clear, right? But no, it's kidding, right? But there's certain things that are clear and less clear. But there's always things we have to sort of assume. We have to use our experience. We have to use our heart. We have to use our intellect. We have to use our feelings, our intuition. And that was the word I was looking for, right? Our intuition, our experience. And a lot of times we make decisions, right, based off the experience and our intuition and how we judge things and how we interpret things and how we judge other people. Apologize. My voice is still not 100%, right? And how we interpret it, what happens to us. Says the Torah, the same way the Kohen Gadol is to have that or, to have that light, and to have that tamim, to have that purity, and to have that completion. It has to be a libo. He has to be the Kohen Gadol who was pure, like the Shemen Zayis, and is working on his libo and has that knowledge. And that's something that we have to also remind ourselves, that a lot of times our decisions are based off not necessarily what is the or, what is the light. A lot of times it's based off, and unfortunately, and I'm talking to myself too, and I don't want to be so, I don't mean to be morbid over here, but it's from the choshech, the darkness, right? We do things out of fear. We do things out of unknown. We do things out of concern. We do things out of really, I don't know. You know how many times I've been told, Rabbi, I don't know, how people are going to look at me. I've never been to an Orthodox synagogue before. I've never kept shop. Really, like really, I could close my business. Sure, right? It's not because of what the positive or it's because a lot of times we do things out of the fear factor, out of the unknown. And therefore we just fall back to what we're comfortable with, which is not necessarily the light, which is not necessarily the right thing to do. That's our experience. That's your experience, but that's not necessarily how to interpret the Urim Tumim. It's not the way to interpret the messages that are being sent to us. We have messages all the time. I've said this before, and it's not going to be that funny because I can't really say it properly right now, right? But the guy that is who's on his way to Manhattan to get a job interview, and traffic is crazy and this and that, and New York, and finally he gets in there and he says, "God, if I get a parking spot right in front of the building, right, I'll be able to make it, and I'll change my ways, and I'll give 50% of this deal to tzedakah, and blah blah blah, the whole 9 yards." Right? And of course, it's a one-way street. Then he turns onto the street, and lo and behold, as he turns onto the street and there's no car in front of him, a car right in front of the building pulls out. So he looks up to God. He said, "God, I don't need you anymore. I have a spot." He missed the boat, right? God is talking to him. The letters are bouncing. Look, I'm helping you, right? I'm helping you. The letters are okay. You can interpret it, okay, look, it's coincidence in the car. I don't need your help. All right. What? The only way he would have seen it is like, as he gets in, all of a sudden this car like lifts up and oh, look, I have a spot. Like, right? No, things are never that. Yes, miracles sometimes happen, right? But every day is a miracle. It's just we have to interpret it. We have to look at the letters and be able to interpret it. And that's what we have to do. And it doesn't make a difference how old we are, young, old, right? It doesn't make a difference where we're holding, religious, not religious, on our way, not on our way, this, that, so many different terminologies now. I can't keep up, right? But whatever it is, we have to look, and if we're not sure, we have to go to the Kohen Gadol to understand it. If we're not sure ourselves, speak to someone. Speak to someone that doesn't have your desires and doesn't have your struggles. Someone that knows how to interpret. Someone that you trust. A rabbi. Someone that you trust that has worked on his Torah and has worked on his lave and has worked on understanding things, and get their input. Because we have to go to the Kohen Gadol to be able to ask the Urim Tumim. Not everybody just can ask the Urim Tumim. Sometimes we can interpret it ourselves. Sometimes we need the help of other people. But we have to understand that we have to keep that light. I think that's it's a life-changing message, and something that I try to reflect on myself, and something that I have to keep on working on also. And it's a life-changing message, and how we're supposed to view our lives is realize that everything that happens is like the letters bouncing up on the lighting up on the Urim Tumim, on the different stones. The question is, how are we going to interpret it? Are we going to interpret it saying Shabbos? Are we going to interpret it saying Amuna, belief? Are we going to interpret it saying or not? Or not? Are we going to say no? We're going to interpret saying, I have to work and say, I can't close my bed. Didn't make a blessing. It's okay. It's not. It's okay. It's only vegetables. Vegetables have bugs in it. You have to make sure they're checked. Not every vegetable, right? Lettuce and things, they have to check them. Okay, peppers are fine. Right? You don't know what knife they used. Right? Could be if it's in the kitchen, they use the same knife. Okay, if it's not, so then okay, that's fine. Right? That's why you could buy cut up fruit from big supermarkets. You could buy cut up fruit. Because in the big supermarkets, we know that they don't mix it's different sections have different knives and different things. But your mom and pop shop where they have like a smaller place, so they don't really have them anymore so much. But you remember the good old days, where you walked in and they had like the chicken on one side and the vegetables on the other side and the this and the that and the flowers, like in the one you walk into the door, right? Remember those shops? Who am I to say you remember? Of course, you guys. I remember, but okay, right? But so that's a problem, because then they could use it, say they wash it out, but they could use the same knife. So you have to know every situation. You have to know every situation. That's being that's being enlightened. That's being tamim. That's being complete. Because when you are complete, complete doesn't mean to say you have everything understood. Complete doesn't mean to say that you have everything down pat. Complete means to say that you understand that you don't know everything. And you understand that you're seeking the R, you're seeking the light, and you have to reevaluate your life. That's when someone's complete. We'll never be complete. How can we ever be complete, right? Until our neshama leaves our body, right? As long as we're on this world, we always have something to fix. We always have something to grow. We always have something to change. But tamim means to say, or tamim, from being pure, from being complete, means to say that you understand that you're not complete. You understand that you need help. You understand that you need help to interpret your life, to understand what the different messages that Hashem is sending you, different people that Hashem puts into your life. That's what it means, complete. And that's what the Tumim is. And that takes a lave, that takes a heart, right? It takes a neshama. Right, the neshama is by the heart. Right, that's what we say. Right, Ezu avodah shebalev zu tefillah. What is the avodah of the heart? Says the Gemara. What is the service of the heart? Zu tefillah. It's prayer. What do you mean? Avodah of the heart is prayer. Right? Yeah, because that's the neshama. The heart represents our neshama. Right, and when we connect to that, then we're able to really start seeing clearly and understanding and interpreting and growing. And as we started off with, connecting to that oil, the pure oil, the neshama in our bodies. I'm going to stop now. I'm sorry, it's getting a little harder for me to talk. Right. So I apologize. It's going to be. Let me turn this recording off.